Friday night, the night before Sand Hollow.
Friday night, all Sand Hallows Eve.
Yeah. And I know we've got another club member Christy's doing Ironman Tulsa.
Ironman Tulsa, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so some big races coming up for sure. It's really interesting, the race schedule is just filling up.
Yeah.
It seems like more and more races are being added and moved around. And I mean, if you want to do a triathlon this fall or late summer, there's lots that are there, but man, a lot of them are full too.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. Actually, I was looking for a 70.3 to register for, and they were all full except for Indian Wells. And I was able to get in to that in December.
Didn't they just announce one,
Timberland? Yeah, that's back east. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually add another one on the West Coast somewhere.
Yeah.
Just because everything's sold out, and it's a business, right? Hey, if everything's sold out, obviously there's a pent up demand. Let's keep adding.
Yeah.
Even Salem, I mean, that got added because of just we can make some money.
I wonder how they're going to do it with all the logistics, all the material you need to put on for an event, because obviously if you just have one or two events a weekend, you just need 2 arches. But now they're going to have 5 races a weekend. They're going to have 5 arches. They're going to have all the supplies. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all works.
Yeah. You're it's very, very true. Because so far it's been one race and then a weekend off, at least with Ironman, right? But yeah, you're right. There's going to be some weekends where there's multiple things going on.
Yeah. So
logistically moving stuff around. Yeah, you're right.
I always am impressed with the seeing that we put on our tri club events, and there's a little bit of logistic work to that, and just doing our small event, just makes me really realize the amount of work that companies like BBSC do, or Ironman, or Challenge, or any of these big companies that put on these races. The amount of work that goes into it is really tremendous.
Well, and if you think about just the physical side of like the physical infrastructure is one, but then the registration side and the software side, and that, I mean, I think that's just as big of a hurdle.
Yeah, no, that's right. And then people management, making sure you got the right people in the right spots, and then trying to keep everyone safe, and it's pretty overwhelming.
I'm glad that's not my job.
Yeah, but it's interesting when people get into races. We did a member spotlight with Paul Brandt
last night,
and Paul did his first race back in 1984. And I did my first race in 85, and so back then the races looked very different than they look now, and
not so polished.
Yeah, I mean the events now are really well done. You get your results right away. The course logistics is usually nailed out pretty good. I can tell you plenty of races that had cones in the wrong spots, or or no cone at all, and you just need to know where you're going.
Yeah, John, it's really interesting that one in particular, because as a competitor, almost nothing is more important to you than the course.
That's right.
Right.
A well-marked course.
Yeah. A well-marked course. I think as a race organizer, it's not as much of a concern to you.
Yeah, right. Right.
It's like, I'm not the one out there running an extra half a K.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're right. It is it's a daunting task for sure. And I'm thankful that there are people that do this. I know it's these are corporations for the most part, but I'm thankful that they exist. I'm actually,
it certainly brings in more people into the sport. It gives them a chance to, if it's well organized, they can host more athletes, which is good.
Yeah.
And it can also be, just a neat event to be part of. And, it's always fun to hear the stories of after someone signed up for the first race, even when it went bad, they just enjoyed it so much that they signed up for another one.
Yeah. The main impetus to sign up for a triathlon is you had a good experience in the last one.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. That's actually a funny little story. When I finished my first 70.3, I can remember sitting. It was in St. George, and sitting on a cot they had set up, and in the shade, and I couldn't move.
Wow.
I literally could not move.
Yeah.
I remember kind of being like almost upset with the people that convinced me that this was a good idea.
Oh.
I can't believe you guys talked me into this. This was the dumbest thing I've ever
Oh,
done.
that's
Then,
funny.
like the next day, I'm
Yeah.
looking, where's the next race?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Because all in all, it was tough, but it was it was a good experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, very
Well,
interesting.
now that I know this is the path that we're gonna go down, but when was your first race?
My first triathlon,
Yeah.
I think it would be 2012,
Mm-hmm.
2012, the Las Vegas Triathlon.
Okay. And what got you into it?
So Marie, actually, my wife, she had been doing triathlon 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
probably, for 6 years, and she was a collegiate swimmer, and yeah, so the swim group that she was with, several people were doing triathlon already, and they like twisted her arm and said, "Oh, this is a good idea, and you should do this." And so, I was busy being an athletic trainer, working with soccer teams at the
Yep.
time, and so on the weekends she'd go do training, and I'd go to a soccer tournament or something like that. And I never did quite understand why someone would want to wake up at 5 a.m. and go for a bike ride or go for a run, or like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
this is the craziest thing. I can't believe people would do this.
Yeah. Right.
And or adults would do this. Kids, this is for
Yeah.
kids,
Right.
And then I can remember going to her first race, and it was that sundown at Lake Las Vegas, or whatever, sundown showdown. And I can remember being there. I'm like, man, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, I can't see myself doing this, because
Mm-hmm.
these are pretty insane.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I went and watched a few of her races, and it was always fun watching her race, because she was one of the best swimmers.
Yeah. Yeah. So she gets out. You see
So
her spot her. Yeah.
almost always was the first female out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was really easy, like, to see her. And I was always so proud. Go, Marie,
Yeah.
go.
Right. Right.
And she's not here right now, so I can say this. But then subsequently, the bike is a little bit slower,
Yep.
and the run is pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
But I still proud of her. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. Right.
First out of water is that sometimes that's the goal.
Sometimes that's just the goal.
Yeah.
And so then she did her first and only 70.3 was at Oceanside, and she begged me to come. And John, I didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, as the spouse, I didn't get it. I'm like, she's like, I really want you to be there.
Yeah.
And so I flew into San Diego the Friday night, got to where they were staying, their little homestay, at like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, woke everybody up, and then so 4 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it is, they're getting up and doing their thing, and I'm like, just go do your thing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And I still remember, like, hanging out. Her boss came too, and hanging out with her boss, and her boss's boss came, because they live in Southern California.
Yeah.
And we're sitting around eating breakfast, watching these people go by, drinking beers in the afternoon, watching people go by.
Yeah.
And I said to her boss, I'm like, this is pretty interesting, but I'll never do it.
Oh, how funny.
She still has the same boss, and he always asks,
Yeah.
hey, how's Ted's triathlon career going? I remember when he said he would never do it. And so it is interesting how one finds themselves sitting there drinking beer, watching a triathlon, to actually competing, and making that, making the ultimate transition, the ultimate T1, from not being an endurance athlete to being an endurance athlete.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how cool. That's a neat story. I didn't know all that. So
yeah. And then so that was not the thing that even stimulated me to do it, right? Like, there was a lot of pieces to it, but I can remember doing my first event was a 1 mile run.
Mm-hmm. And you were
I was heavy.
more back then.
Yeah, but and that was part of the impetus. But I can still remember doing this 1 mile run, and it was me and 4 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Uh,
know,
uh,
because everyone else was doing the 5K.
oh,
I was doing the 1 mile fun run part.
oh, wow.
Like, and that was probably 2010 or 2011. And just look at look at where I am now, and it's like,
It's
oh my gosh,
amazing.
it's
It's
crazy.
amazing. I mean, less than, about 10 years. So
Yeah, yeah, just over
that's,
a decade.
that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right. So using that experience,
Yes.
now you're in a totally different spot. You're an elite athlete. You compete internationally,
Yep.
and you compete. I mean, you don't just do the international events, you compete. And it's so cool to see where you are right now. So now when someone comes up to you, says, hey, I'm going to do my first race. How do you draw on your experience,
Yeah.
and what do you do?
And it's interesting, right? Because I think we all in the community, in the triathlon community, get this where people ask that question,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's how people do this.
Yeah.
Is most of the people that I know that have gotten triathlon were swimmers because they come because the swim group that I'm in. That's where they tend to come from, and like, oh yeah, I was a swimmer and I would like to do a triathlon, and I've even met some people that were runners. The interesting one is a few have been students of mine, or former students that have done
Mm-hmm.
nothing. Like they weren't swimmers, they weren't bikers, they weren't runners, but I think that they saw the passion in me and
Yeah.
what I was doing, and they're like, okay, like I wanna do a triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, John, you've probably had many people reach out to you. I mean, we have it even on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Where do I start? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So, it really is an interesting question. I think the first question that comes to my mind when somebody says that is, okay, number one, why do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, what have you done before?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
I think those are the two questions that I always want answered before I guess go further. I don't know. Is there other questions that you would ask them back first?
I usually ask, when is the event?
Oh, you're assuming they've already signed up for something.
That's right. That's right.
Because I'm assuming they haven't. They just want to do a triathlon.
Oh,
But you're right. They
interesting.
have that too. Usually those people, they've maybe done something before.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the worst, this actually hasn't happened to me, but I have friends this has happened where they have a coworker that they're like, hey, I signed up for an Ironman because my friends were doing it. And it's this fall.
Yeah.
And right now it's like May. So I'm thinking about starting to train for it. What
That's
should I
right.
do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, your friends are horrible people.
That's right.
Number one, get new
You're
friends.
late.
First step, find new friends.
That's right.
Because they did not do you a very good service there.
No, for sure.
Have you run into that?
Not so much the going that extreme, but a lot of times you do talk with people, or I've talked with people, and they tell you the event, and you're like, you just bit off way more than you're ready for. But maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, it sometimes, and in all the spotlights we've done, sometimes that first race is such a horrible experience, but yet it ends up being motivating, because a lot of people in this sport have that mindset that they want to overcome a challenge.
Yeah.
And now they just did an event that kicked their butt, and now they want to change that. And so sometimes it works in their
Yeah.
favor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So I guess taking the next step is, can you swim?
Yes.
Right? Because I think that's the biggest hurdle for people. I think, everyone for the most part can run/walk,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone can learn how to ride a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are nervous and people have their issues,
Mm-hmm.
but the swimming, there's a fear associated with it, and there's an apprehension, and there's an unknown to a lot of people. Like, John, I think I've told you this before, but when I started this, I didn't know how to swim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember Marie was like, well, if you want to do this, you need to come to our, the masters team that, she runs. And I'm like, I can't. I know all these people because these are people that would come to our house for barbecues and stuff like that. I knew them all, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't. I can't swim. Like I can't just jump in with this masters group. Like, and she's like, well, there's a slow lane, and
Yeah.
I'm like, no. And I was working out at like in a local gym, and they had a pool. I'm like, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna go until I can swim 400. Like, and not necessarily straight. I mean, 400 in one session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I can remember my first few times, and the first time Marie came with me, and I think I got 200.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a big accomplishment.
It may have took me 20 minutes or whatever.
It's amazing how hard swimming 200 is if you don't swim. It's not easy.
So hard.
Mm-hmm.
And just 25, just going down.
Yeah.
And I'd get to the end and I have to hold on to the end and just be like,
yeah.
Okay, I made it.
Yeah.
Like, and I just went one way, right? And so for me, like that was probably the most critical thing. And so that's the question I would ask is like, what is your swim background? That's the number one thing. And if you say, I don't know how to swim or never really swam, my first thing then would be like, okay, we need to find someone that can help teach you how to swim.
Yeah.
And I think it's critical that we find these people in our community or wherever the community is that can teach adults how to swim. And it is a skill, and it takes a very patient person, because we're putting people in a completely different environment.
So this is great because the research shows if you're going to die in a triathlon, you're going to die in the swim.
Yeah.
And usually, even in the first 200 meters of the swim, is when people really run into early problems. And there's, not a clear reason for it, but there's some things that start to come together: cold water, anxiety. You're maybe even get a little bit of water in your lungs, something like that. But it's an open water issue, and so I love the way that you're going here. And then I even take it, I follow through on that, and then I say, have you swam in open water? Even for our swimming friends, I've got an international level swimmer that is obviously super fast breaststroke, and he does not like open water swimming. And I can barely get him into Lake Mead. He comes in from out of town. He just does not like it, and gets anxious, and so it's one thing to do pool swim, but then to take that pool swim and now go out. Do you remember your first open water swim?
Well, absolutely. Without a doubt, Marie took me out to Lake Mead. It was the weekend before the triathlon, the first triathlon I did.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out and swam together, and just went buoy to buoy and swam my 750 because that's what the race was going to be.
Yep.
But with her at my side, you know what I mean? And having her there,
world of difference.
Yep. And that's another thing I would obviously say to people: if you're going to go out, and obviously if you're a higher level swimmer, still have somebody with you, but as a beginner, get someone to come with you, even though they're going to be faster than you. Like, obviously I'm super lucky, like, she's my wife and she's a great swimmer, but and she was willing to take the time for her to, like, lay on her back and do some probably I was swimming as hard as I could. She was sculling, and but like that helped me a tremendous amount. And I only did it once, like just one time.
Wow.
But it definitely, that definitely helped.
Yeah, no, because it's totally different. And I've done that with new swimmers who were comfortable swimming in the pool, but then we've gone down to Lake Mead and they got in trouble really quick, because once you get in where you can't touch anymore, the water's clear, but you still have some murkiness to it. It's not like a pool, and everything seems so far away. Once you're down at water level, and it can get intimidating pretty quick. So,
well, the truth is, you go out 100 yards, that's a long way.
It is.
Right? Like because to swim 100 yards when you're when you're that level of swimmer, may take you 3 minutes. So you think about it, you get into trouble, and to get into shore is a 3-minute terror, right? So no, I think you're right.
And I love the swim buoys.
Yeah.
And you know that, and I think most people who listen to this know what I'm referring to. But you wrap it around, you just strap it on your waist, and you've got a little air buoy behind you, and that's great for visibility. But then also great if you do get in any trouble, you can just grab onto it. It doesn't take much to hold a person up. It's not a lot of force that you need to you know, hold your head above water.
So I guess my first advice for people was, if you don't swim, you need a swim coach or a swim teacher. I'm not going to say a coach. I'm saying a swim teacher. I think that's really, really important. And yeah, so then the next thing would be obviously if they're a good swimmer, then what? Like, what's the next piece of advice? So if that box is checked.
Well, what I do is then I ask more questions. I ask about gear.
Yeah.
And I usually ask about the bike next. And I say, so what are you riding?
Yeah. And that's that can be a very uncomfortable situation when they tell you, hey, I just bought a mountain bike. I spent $500 on a mountain bike, and it is awesome. I love it. You know, I go out in the mountains and I'm riding all the time. And you're just like, oh,
yeah.
And you want to do triathlon? Okay, we can make this work.
That's right.
You put your brave face on. But that's how typical is that?
It is very typical. Or sometimes they say, oh, I don't even have a bike.
I don't have a bike yet. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, we got to get some wheels underneath you. So borrow a bike, something. You know, I may try to help them find something just to get some sense of biking. And it's funny because you and I were talking before we started tonight. It is interesting how a lot of people have not ridden bikes throughout their lives.
And I think it's becoming more.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, more ubiquitous that people don't ride bikes. I think if we were to go to, like, for example, like a local high school in Las Vegas and ask how many of you really know how to ride a bike, it might be less than half.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that historically was not a thing. Like in North America, kids rode bikes.
No, that's right.
So then that's going to translate forward to if you didn't ride a bike growing up and now you're 30 and you want to do a triathlon, you may not know how to ride a bike. So then that's the next thing is, like, how do you where do we send those people if they literally they're not comfortable on a bike, or they've maybe sat on a bike for a little bit when 15 years ago. So then what do we do?
I tell them, have you joined the Las Vegas Tri Club Facebook page?
There you go.
And they go, oh, what's that? And I say, you got to join that, because you will find someone else who is your level that you can ride with. And then it becomes very important, to start forming that, that group of people to go with, because one, it's motivating, it helps get you out consistently. But then they also don't feel like they're holding anyone back. And so it is important to try to find that community of people that you can ride with.
So that being said, do you think we're going to see a Peloton Revolution in the next year?
I don't know. That's a good question, because, and you're referring to the Peloton indoor bike, right? Yeah.
Right. Which has sold, I don't know, 5 million of them in the last year.
Has it really? Oh,
like super ridiculous number. I don't even know the number, but it's literally, they couldn't make them fast enough. And people love it.
Yeah.
Right. They love spin class and they love doing that. And I think spin class 10 years ago was a big push for people to go into triathlon.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if Peloton or Nordic Track or whatever these companies are is going to spur, once people leave their cocoons from COVID and want, say, oh, man, I've been on the spin bike for a year. Yeah. I want to go do something outside. Well,
we've
revival.
The whole bike industry take off. And
yep, exactly.
Not only the pedaling variety, but even the e-bikes.
Yeah.
And so people certainly are finding the sport this last, year and a half. So no, that'll be interesting to see if they transition into events like triathlons.
I think I don't think we're too far off, honestly, of seeing an e-bike triathlon.
Oh yeah?
Well, you know, there's an e-bike world championships now. The UCI has.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yes. So you can actually win a world championship in e-bike.
Wow. So I guess
I don't know much about it. I
just
just saw it.
e-bike. I don't even know.
You've never ridden one?
No.
Oh, they're super fun.
Are they?
Yeah, especially the ones that they're pedal assist, and so
Yeah.
if the motor's doing 200 watts and you're doing 200 watts, you're doing 400 watts.
Really?
It's amazing, like climbing some hills on an e-bike.
Wow.
It's pretty fun.
I guess I was thinking about the other way. I was worried more about the mechanical doping issue that we may see because
so maybe what we need a division says, hey, you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
You want a motor on your bike? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The motors have been getting smaller.
Yeah.
And less conspicuous. So, yeah. But I love the e-bikes because I do think it's been a good gateway for people to find the sport. And,
yes.
I see that so many people out on the River Mountain Loop Trail with e-bikes. And some days I'm riding uphill and into a headwind and I'm
getting past.
Yeah, that'd be nice to have one of those.
Yep, getting past. No, I actually, I think that's a good, you're right, it's a good gateway. So we got somebody that they really don't know how to bike. I agree with you about the loaner. So that was my first bike. Someone from the swim club, she loaned me she had an extra bike, an old bike, and she lent it to me. And, I rode that for a couple months and, and before I really recognized, it was good because I didn't know if I really wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it was, after a couple of months, I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy my first bike.
Yep.
And it was way better than actually just going to buy my first bike without
trying anything. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Trying anything. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the triathlon community is so good that we've seen it so many times, even on our Facebook page. Someone's like, hey, does someone have a medium-sized bike for a friend who wants to get into triathlon? Bam! It's like within 10 minutes, 2 people are.
I know, it's amazing.
Offering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so great because that is a huge barrier to entry into our sport.
It is.
They get overwhelmed with which bike do I buy and do I need to have a
no, you're right, because they start looking at bikes and go to a bike shop or look online, and all of a sudden the bike that they think they would use is $2,000 and they've never even raced yet. It's like, and I'm all about the experience. If I'm talking to a very first timer, I'm like, you just need to do your first race. It doesn't matter. Borrow a wetsuit, borrow a bike, borrow whatever you need.
Yep.
But just do that first race and then get into the sport going from there.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. So the other issue I've seen a lot with people is in the running it has the same kind of fear for people. I used to run, but my knees hurt, or I used to run, but my feet hurt, or whatever the case may be, or I hate running.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of hatred towards running, more so than swimming or biking.
Mm-hmm.
People just, I hate running.
Well, okay, but here's, the old PE courses, and a lot of times even in sports, coaches would use and teachers would use running as a punishment.
Yep.
And so, you're late. Oh, go run.
Yep.
Go run X distance. That's right. Oh, you
weren't paying attention. Go run a lap.
That's right. And so it becomes a punishment, and that is such a hurdle to overcome, is that mindset that you may get as a young kid. And
John, in my previous career, I worked in soccer, youth soccer, forever, and that was the punishment. And I was doing, doing some speed coaching and agility coaching and athletic training at the same time, and I had to have many meetings with coaches and with parents and with athletes, explaining to them the benefits of a soccer player being able to run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
And getting that mentality that this is not punishment.
Right.
Like this is training.
Mm-hmm.
And let's find something. If you really need to punish a kid, which I don't think that's a good way to go, but if you do, let's find something else.
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't find a piece that's a cornerstone of the sport.
Right.
It's like, why don't you make the punishment they've got to go and kick 60 soccer balls? Well,
Yeah.
we'd never do that. Well, there's no difference. You're spot on with that.
Oh,
You're spot on with that.
that's crazy. But
The punishment for a soccer player is like, you don't get to run. So then
I
you're gonna be
know.
out of shape. So when you play the game, you're gonna look bad. How about that?
Yeah. Oh, all right. But I bet you the very next question they may have for you when they find out what you do is, what shoe should I buy?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It's overwhelming. You go into a shoe store, any shoe store, even, a Big Five or an REI, let alone, run store specific like Red Rock Running or Performance Footwear.
Anywhere.
Go into any stores and it's just, you got walls of shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is interesting because this I learned from my previous life in soccer, and dealing with kids and shoes. And my advice, I think I probably told this before, but is to go to a shoe store with a friend that you really trust,
Mm-hmm.
and give that friend your budget and say, okay, I can afford $80 to $120.
Mm-hmm.
And then put a blindfold on. And then have your friend work with the salesperson and bring out 5 or 6 pairs of shoes, tie them up for you, and have you just stand in them. First step, just stand. Don't look at them. Don't be like, oh, I need new Nike. I want
this brand or that brand.
I want Saucony. I want Aces because my friend runs an Aces. No.
Mm-hmm.
Just put on 5 different pairs of shoes.
I love that.
Stand up in them with a blindfold on, because it doesn't matter if they're pink or they're purple or whatever color.
Mm-hmm.
Do they feel good in your feet?
Mm-hmm.
Just standing there. Because if they don't feel good just standing there, they're never going to feel good. And the other thing I'm going to tell you, and we haven't talked much about this, but shoes do not need to be broken in. And because
the way they're built now,
they're not made of leather.
Mm-mm.
They're synthetic. Guess what gets broken in? Your feet.
Yeah, that's true. I like that.
Your feet break in, not the shoe. So let's start with that. So that's my advice for people with shoes, especially in the beginning, until they really can recognize what a good feeling shoe is for them.
Yeah. I love the blindfold part because you're right. A lot of times they zero in on brand or color or look. And no, that's a great, I'm going to steal that. That's really a good way to do it.
Yeah.
And, the truth is, now we've done a lot of research on shoes, and it's embarrassing, despite all the research we've done, and now I'll include the science community in general. We've been researching shoes since the late 60s, early 70s, when really the running boom really started, and Nike came out with the waffle shoe and really changed footwear. We've been researching it since that time, and we still can't say, "Oh, Ted, here's the shoe for you." Yeah, it's really.
And you're talking about usually somebody healthy.
That's right. That's right.
So when someone comes in and says, hey, I've had foot problems or knee problems or hip problems or back problems, that, exponentially makes things more difficult.
Yeah.
So if you think about, in the biomechanics world, for the most part, like it's healthy people trying to figure out what shoe's best for them. And then you add in pathology. I've dealt with it my entire career in athletic training, is helping people find good footwear. And then that footwear that is not a crutch either. And we, once again, we should have a whole talk on this. But it's so critical that somebody finds something that can work for them, not in spite of them.
Well, and I love that phrase. And I also think of it as the shoe gets far too much credit for preventing an injury and far too much blame for causing an injury.
I completely
The vast amount of running related injuries specifically is training errors.
Yep. Oh, it's like 90%.
Yep.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But there are people that buy ill-fitting shoes because of look, or because of branding, and they put up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they end up changing the running mechanics, and then they change the running mechanics. Then it doesn't take that much of an error in training. Like your window of error goes down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think your threshold for a problem is lower when you have the wrong shoe.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it could actually be, the shoe that's working for you, but you say, oh, well, now this is going to allow me to run further and longer. And you change, your running routine, and that introduces a problem. So.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right there. So so now we got them we got them some swimming, we got them a bike hopefully, and we got them some running shoes.
Yeah.
So that's the equipment side. But then how do we get them to understand the nuances or how to train for 3 sports in one?
Mm-hmm.
And because I got to be honest with you, John, when I start to talk to people about like the amount of training I do, and I show them a training log, they're like, this is insane.
No, they're done.
They're done. Like 15 hours a week. No.
Yeah.
So my next question is, how much time?
So to me, it depends on the distance that they're doing. And I love it when someone says, I'm going to do the sprint for the first one. Now, I don't discount the sprint. Sprint, where I love, and this, I love sprint races, and you can redline that race, and it's a serious race, and I love that distance. But I love it when someone says that's their first distance, because it's very doable with a minimum amount of training to finish. And that can be an Ironman for someone. That's their Ironman, do that sprint race, because they may never have swam 700 yards before. They may never have biked anywhere from 10 to 15 miles, depending on the course, or even done a 5K. And so to string all 3 of those together, it's an amazing feeling. And so I love it when I hear that. And then my advice to them is often just get training consistently.
And we've talked about consistency training before, and the consistency might be 3 or 4 hours a week, and that's it.
Yeah.
But it's still consistent.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you mentioned all that, because I had this conversation with somebody just a little while ago, and they were talking about doing their first triathlon. And I'm like, well, and I'm trying to convince them to do a sprint rather than they want to do a 70.3.
Yeah.
And I was like, here's the thing. When you go to work on Monday after your race, your coworkers are going, how'd it go? Yeah, good. I did a triathlon.
Yeah.
You're now a triathlete. You did a triathlon. You're a triathlete. They don't know you did a sprint Olympic, and don't go to work and say, oh, I just did a sprint.
No.
You did a triathlon.
That's
you swam, you biked, you ran. And I guarantee you the person in the cubicle next to you at work has no idea the difference. So you could be proud, right? And then you can say, okay, well, what's the next step in distance, if that's what you want?
Yep.
But also, we've talked about this before, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves is, so you did your first sprint triathlon, it took you 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you did a half marathon, it took you 2 hours, you'd be all proud. You'd be hanging up your medal in your office, and you're like, I did a half marathon, and everyone would be like, oh man, that's so good. Doing a sprint triathlon, in my opinion, is harder than doing a half marathon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I agree.
Because
more skill set,
you've had to do 3 sports, and you were exercising at your limit for basically the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And I think we as a community need to really push that. Just because it's a sprint triathlon it's no lesser.
No.
And the best athletes in the world on the World Triathlon Series, which is the best triathletes in the world, they do sprints and Olympic distances only.
Yeah.
And shorter and super sprints now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, on Slow Twitch recently, someone started a thread on who's the best triathlete, and that it quickly devolved to that, where it's like, wait a second, are you talking about across all distances? Then you've got people like Ali or Javier, that they can win at almost any distance. But then you have other people who are great at the full distance, iron distance. And see, I even hate using full and half, because that gives the wrong connotation. But the they're great at the iron distance, maybe not so great at a 70.3.
Yeah.
And so where do they fall in that ranking? But I love it when people can do all distances, and I
but here's the thing: in the top athletes in the world, nobody, in my opinion, could win a WTS sprint race and also win an Ironman in the same year. I don't think it's ever been done.
Yeah.
And I don't think we'll ever see it because it's just the training is so different.
That's right. You see a lot of those folks go towards the longer distance.
Yep.
You know, Jan Frodeno.
But they're doing it because they're following the money.
Yeah, right. Or that they've lost that competitive edge.
No, or they've lost the speed, right? Well, I was saying, but they're still following the money for them because they can't make a paycheck at the Olympic distance anymore, right? Because most of those people in the Olympic distance, they're not making great money.
No.
Right? So, and oftentimes their federations are paying them kind of, you know, basically to train and to, you know, to kind of fly around the world. But yeah, I think that they're following where they can be successful.
So for the person who's going to do a sprint race, what do you tell them in terms of combining the three? How do you, if they ask? I mean, they may not even ask. And
I think at that point for a first race, you don't even go down that road. You say, okay, you're gonna train to swim, you're trained to run, you're trained to bike. I'm not a big fan at all of doing like what we call brick sessions, where it's like 2 back to back with a new person.
Not new, right?
Not new. That's more of an advanced thing, and I question the you know how important it even is to do that. I probably do less brick sessions than anybody. But yeah, I tell them, hey, let's get you to swim proficiently. Let's get you to bike proficiently, and my thing would be like, can we get it so you can actually run the complete 5K?
Yep.
Can you actually just run a 5K?
That's great. That's a great approach.
Yeah.
And so I agree 100% without getting the bricks involved. But then I do talk about the transitions.
No, for sure. I think it's really important that you do
as separate events.
Yeah.
Not even as training, you know, to go from transition from the bike to the run, like what you're talking about, but just getting them think about, okay, well, what are you going to put next to your bike?
Yeah.
And going down that path, because a lot of times like, oh, well, what do I need there?
Yeah, but I also think with people with the first triathlon, you explain that to them, but you say, hey, there's no hurry. Like, take time, get your socks on, make sure your shoes are done up, make sure your chin strap is done, have a drink. That's the other thing I tell brand new people in transition: stop, have a drink, catch your breath. You're not here to win this, right? Yeah, I know you want to beat your buddy, that's fine, but you know, take your time in the transition, especially in T1. Dry off. If your feet are covered in sand, have a water bottle to pour water on your feet and get the sand off. Have a towel. You know, it should, because it's not going to be enjoyable if you got sand in your feet and you know and your socks are halfway on and you're and you forget your sunglasses and you're on the bike and you're squinting the entire time and getting a bug in your eye or whatever. Like you want them to, in my opinion, you want them to enjoy the day. And in my opinion, the best way to enjoy the day is to take the time in the transitions.
I love that. That is great. I the same thing. I just be comfortable. Be comfortable for the next segment. So getting out of the water, take your time. If you've got your wetsuit, get that off, put it aside, get all your bike gear on, and make sure you're ready to go before you head out. Yeah. And same thing on the run. It's the more that you can make it comfortable, and the more that you're going to enjoy that first experience, and then sign up. But again, maybe we're not doing it right. Maybe we need to tell them to have that disastrous event and then overcome it. But I don't know.
But I mean, I don't think so. I think we should try and have the most enjoyable experience we can for people, so they actually, you know, because here's the thing: is it's going to be hard no matter what, right? To finish that event, and, you know, and look at first timers in a sprint triathlon. It's 2 hours for a lot of them. That's a long time, right? Like, think about it, John, when you go to a conference and someone talks for 2 hours. It's horrible.
That's right.
Right? And you're just sitting there.
I know.
You know, like it's amazing that, you know, that we equate this. This is short, 2 hours.
Okay, so now let me ask you
Yeah.
sort of a different angle to this. When someone says they're doing their first event, how do you strike that balance between being inquisitive and supportive and offering advice? Like, what do you listen for to say, oh, this person wants advice? Because sometimes people, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And they're not ready to ask at that stage. So how do you approach that?
John, that is such a tough question. Like, honestly, that's probably the hardest question you've asked tonight.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that is personal interaction 101. Like,
Yeah.
reading somebody and you know, because I think like, everyone is going to be slightly different, but I'm really honest with people. I'm like, do you want advice? Like, do you want me to do because I'll spend a little bit of time with you. If you want, we can go grab a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And have a conversation about this.
Yeah.
If you want me to not give you any advice at all, that's fine. I'll be I'll you know, when I see you at the race, I'll take a picture of you and I'll be clapping for you, and that's fine too. You know, and oftentimes it's coming down to like, oh, it's your first time. I'm gonna, you know, because I probably won't have the patience to deal with a first timer myself, right? Really in depth. I'm going to find you somebody that works with first timers, and we have some good coaches in the club that kind of specialize in helping first timers. And so that's the other question is ask is like, are you interested in having a coach? And you say, hey, listen, like, I'm not the person for you for this, but if you're really interested, you know, go see this person.
Yeah.
And or here's a couple of people that maybe you'd want to would want to work with. That's difficult though, you know, because now like you're kind of putting your reputation on the line by saying this person's a good person for you to go work with.
Yeah. Right.
But I think that's John. I don't know how you'd handle that question, but that nuance.
It's hard, and I am usually very reluctant to start offering advice unless the person really seeks it out. And I would instead approach it as being very encouraging. That's great. I love it. You're doing training. That's fantastic. You know, you're getting ready for the race. That's great. And then if they ask me any questions, then I'll lead into very gently, because it can, you know, as triathlon, there is so much to this sport.
We've done 57 episodes.
You need clip-in pedals. You need, you know, aero bars. You need an aero helmet. You need the right tires, the tire pressure. I mean, just look at all the conversations we've had over this last year and a half. It's overwhelming. And so now, you know, to throw that, well, let's just put it all on. It's hard. And they're going to be getting a lot of that. And so a lot of times I just try to really be, my approach is encourage, and I focus in on the experience and say, you really need to just enjoy the start line and then get to that finish.
So maybe the right answer is give them the address to our podcasts and say, start at episode 1.
Yeah.
And listen to all 57 or whatever we've done. Yeah. And then if you still have questions, let us know, and we'll have an episode to answer that question.
I love it, because actually I've not had anyone ask me. Well, I take that back. I have posted about our podcast for some different people who were looking for some triathlete information, and I said, "Oh, hey, just go check out our."
This might actually help us more than anything with people that ask this question. It's like, hey, listen to episode 12 and episode 57, and that'll be a good start for you. Yeah. See, we could be developing it that way. So, John, if you have an athlete then that, you know, takes it a step further, and, you know, like you said, they start asking the very pointed questions. At what point do you kind of say, you know, because once again, this could last forever. Do you say, hey, you know what, I can't really help you. I can help you more, but I don't want
to. Well, I'm not a coach. And so,
no, you're not.
No. And I love the question, because that does come up. And I'll say that specifically. I said, well, I don't coach anyone, but here are some people who do that. And so I yeah, I try to, walk that fine line where I'm not taking someone on as but I do believe the relationships that people can form within the tri community is what keeps them engaged in the sport.
Yeah.
So I often, again, I love pointing people to our Facebook page because they start getting engaged in the community. And once you do that, that's the hook. It's, meeting up for someone on a swim on a, 6 a.m. in the morning, or, even in the evening, or going for a bike ride with a group, or doing something, a trail run with it. That's the hook. And once you hook people in, that just builds that community, and it's a lot of fun, and you get to enjoy it. And then you pick up those nuances of the sport, shoes, or what bike, or what tire, or what wheel to use. So I really do try to push them in the community. So I guess to your question, I would push them first to the community and start forming relationships, but also inform them that there's people who coach and have some great advice for new athletes or athletes at any level.
Yeah, that's a good one. I guess the last step is when they ask, because this is another one that always happens, is like, and this is not even just coaching, but in just asking in general, is oh, I read about this type of training, should I do this? Or I read about this, should I do this? And I think you already alluded to it, but there is a million and one ways to train.
Yeah.
And with a new athlete, I tell them, don't get caught up into that. Just go out, swim, go out, bike, and go out and run.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing I can tell you is build volume slowly over time.
Yeah.
All the nuances of this type of training versus this type of training, save that for later. Yeah. If you really get into this and you want to delve into it, and even still, there's a million one ways different to train. If you're to take the top 100 athletes in the world and look at their training plan, they're all different.
Yep.
Right? Or you take, even in like our age group, the top 100 in St. George 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, they all train differently. And there's no, in my opinion, there's no right or wrong way to train, especially in the beginning, is if you're just consistent and slowly adding volume. And that's what I tell people too. Super easy. Don't get caught up in that stuff. Don't go read this book, and all these philosophies. If you're running 20 minutes a time, next week start doing 25 minutes a time.
No, I love that, and I think that's, now that you say that, I think I do talk a lot about that with that new triathlete, staying injury free and consistent training. Train today at the intensity so you can train again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're going to reduce your risk of injury. And I always get, it's a little sad when someone takes up the sport and then all of a sudden I see them a few weeks later and like, oh yeah, now I got a knee problem or my hip's bugging me. And I'm like, just be consistent, and your story that you started off with is fantastic. You're starting off very slowly. And, when I got back in the sport, just a little bit before you started up, I got back in around 2007. I was literally going out for maybe 1 to 5 minute run, just moving, and then working up from there. And so it really is. It's a long process to do it, but if you do it, you're more likely to have success than trying to go out and hit that latest training craze, and then you end up with an injury.
I really like there's some programs that are pretty easy, like the Couch to 5K stuff.
Yeah.
Because they, for the most part, those use that kind of philosophy. And, I don't know if there's a Couch to 750 swim.
I don't know. That's a good one.
Couch to 12-mile bike. But but that's that was the magic of those programs, is that it was incremental and it was attainable for someone that literally was on the couch.
Well, and it was also community forming.
Yes.
And again, man, if someone else is depending on you to be there, or your friends are going, you're more likely to get out and in that early morning and go for that run. And so I think those relationships are just so critical, even for introverts like you and me. And I mean, still,
The lone wolves.
thrive on that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's another Friday night. Kind of wrapped up. I think we did a good job tonight. That was fun.
Yeah, no, it is fun. And it is fun thinking about new people in the sport. And actually, I saw on the Sand Hollow post on our Tri Club page, there's a lot of people who are doing their first race. So that's going to be exciting. So
I think that was my second race, and I loved it.
Yeah.
It was cool to go somewhere to race.
Yeah.
Even if it was just up the road and we spent the night, and there was a group of people I knew, and yeah.
By any chance, do you remember when you did Sand Hollow early on? Was that the one where they had to run in the desert, in the sand?
No.
Oh yeah,
They did one where they ran in the sand.
Oh, that was brutal. Yeah, it was.
No.
It was. Yeah, they first couple of years they did it. It was taking us not on the road. It was actually taking us north from the parking lot into that sandy area, and boy, that was so hard to run in that after biking.
So it's funny you bring that up, and I'll share this. So today is the last day for me to commit to race Alcatraz. So I got into the lottery and I got a spot.
Oh,
and it ended.
Iconic race.
I have till the end of tonight to decide.
Oh boy.
And one of the reasons I'm thinking no is because a lot of the run is in sand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't do it for me. Just getting sand in my shoes. Like I've done some epic things, but I do not enjoy, like I've done some some trail runs and stuff where it's really sandy. I hate that feeling.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why they eventually changed the course, because not only was it sand in your shoes, it was red sand. And you cannot get that red sand out of anything up it.
No, it's like it's iron oxide or whatever into your stuff. No, I had no idea they did that. If somebody listens and they've got some pictures from back in those days of the sand run, I'd love to see those.
Yeah. That's great. Well, okay, so I'll have to check with you if you do the Alcatraz. That is an iconic race.
But it's funny, it's not the swim that's holding me back. It's the sand run.
Well, and I was going to say, if you don't do it, we should go do the Alcatraz swim, because I did that and I really enjoyed that. It was that was fun.
I would be up for that. And part of the issue is that the ITU World Championships is the next weekend.
Oh wow.
And they told us that they were going to let us know mid-May if it was going to happen or not.
Okay.
And this week they punted. And they said, we're going to make a decision until June 15th.
Oh boy.
And so I was kind of hedging my bets, because if that race didn't happen, because I'm doing two races, I'm doing a super sprint on Friday and the Olympic distance on Sunday. And Alcatraz is the weekend before. I can't do 3 races at that high level.
That's
too much.
And Alcatraz is so unique.
Yeah.
In terms
and I'll be able to get in again if I want, but so anyways, and it didn't cost anything to get into the lottery, so I just put money.
Tough choices.
It is great. Right? But good. Like, and honestly, if it was not a COVID issue, I wouldn't have even done it, because I was like, I'm going to Edmonton to race that ITU race.
Right.
So, but anyways, which will not be on sand.
No.
Thankfully.
All right. Well, hey, great talking.
Yeah. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.